was on the east side chillin'. Flow so sick, boy, need penicillin. Shoot my shot, I'm always willing. Spend my days plotting how to make a million. Since I was a kid, always wanted to get rich. Live a life of luxury, buy myself a dozen whips. Get a solid gold chain and a rollie for the wrist. This coming from a kid who ain't never been materialistic.
Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Morley.
And I'm Ryan.
And joining us today, we have my good friend, the very talented artist, singer, rapper, you name it. He's amazing. Chris Dezurick, also known as ChrispyD. Hey, Chris, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, Morley. Thank you, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. You're kind of blowing up, man. I feel like every couple months I go on your Spotify page and your top songs are 2.5 million streams. That is no joke. So first off, congratulations, dude, for.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah. If the people who are listening don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about your music, how you got started, and what you're doing?
Yeah, it's
in the scene?
For sure. Hopefully I always feel like douchey when I answer this question. Oh, I shouldn't have said that, boys. Oh,
it's all right. It's all good.
All right.
Okay.
That's like the first rule. Like, don't swear. But I just do it because I love it, cliche. And to reach people, it's empowering to be able to make something out of nothing. And so when something out of an idea that I had in my head, it's not nothing, but it's an idea that I had in my head that wasn't like a tangible thing or that anyone else saw. And then when I was able to do that, and like, I just fell in love with that feeling of creating something that was just in my brain, and then other people consume it, have opinions on it, just observations. It makes me feel good. And so that's why I chase it. ChrispyD, the name ChrispyD was just a name that my name's Chris Dezurick, Christopher Dezurick, ChrispyD. And there's not much more to it than that.
Yeah.
I like making music that is relatable and then also catchy is what I'm really trying to go for, is making songs that you want to sing along to, or it's almost like you can't help it is what I try to go for. You can't help but sing along to it. And then also just relatable. So almost you keep it vague enough and broad enough to the point where anyone who's listening can relate to it.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that your lyrics are vague or broad. Like, I feel you talk about a lot of like heavy hitting stuff going on like in your life.
Like what?
I'm thinking of.
Well, like, for example, like there's one song I was just listening to, like A Million Rappers, that this idea of like making it and being successful, that I think every artist and creative type of person, no matter what it is that they do, is that sense of how do I get to that spot where I'm successful? And then we're always kind of like throwing these messages saying like, oh, this is only for a certain amount of people, and like, who says you can do it? But you're already a rapper. You're doing it. You're succeeding in that.
I would argue, and not even argue, sorry, I don't mean to make it contentious, just let's say that like a million rappers, sure, that's just for a rapper, but it's also a larger message. It could, like you said, it could be for anybody. So I don't know, to me that is a vague, it's sometimes I touch on topics that are like, if I really feel strongly about them, I'll touch on topics that are not that relatable. But also times when you're just honest, like you never know who you're going to relate to because you're being just blatantly honest. So maybe I don't do it maybe I'm not as relatable as I think I am sometimes. I'm not sure.
No, actually, I think I misspoke. I didn't mean that you weren't relatable. I just meant that.
Yeah, I get it.
Your experiences, the way you talk about your experiences, they're very like specific and I think personal to you. And I'm just impressed with like how vulnerable you can be through your songs and like really talk about like the sometimes like intense stuff that's going on in your head and like self-doubt and dealing with like feelings of like narcissism or success.
Appreciate that, man.
It definitely comes across. And I love how you described it as it's catchy, but also it has like lyrics that stick with you, because that's exactly how I would describe your music.
I appreciate that, man. And it's funny. I'm 21 and I don't feel like I've figured it out all yet. Like I really haven't. Like I'm trying to put the pieces together, but they're not always there. I'm not always the most clear-minded. So, but when I get in that state, and if I can find a way to really have an extended period of time where I have a clear mind in my life, I think it will go. I think the music will take an even bigger step. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for sure.
Mm-hmm. And like no artist or creative ever has it all figured out. It's like that old kind of cliche saying, like, not all those who wander are lost. And sometimes just us wandering leads us to finding, work, or inspires us to do certain work that we never would have thought of in the first place.
Absolutely. That's a great expression.
I was wondering, Chris, first of all, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Wanted to ask you just a bit, how did you start your musical journey? What inspired you to pursue hip hop and R&B?
There's always just a weird question because it was kind of just, it didn't happen like overnight. It was like a buildup. It was a slow buildup of like, could I do this? Like, probably not at first. I was like, probably not. And then you keep thinking about it and you just try to honestly evaluate yourself. I was just inspired by music in the way that it could make me feel sometimes when someone would say something that I couldn't put into words. And I'm like, wow, like that just makes me feel so good. So I don't know if there was a specific moment or a specific inspiration. It was just a buildup of believing that I could do it. That was really the biggest hurdle. It was just starting, was just saying I can do this and I don't care. Like Morley said, I can be vulnerable, I guess. And yeah, I just try to be as honest as I can be. And that's that.
Was there ever, like, before you got started, was there any sort of like obstacle or sort of anxieties like stopping you from initially pursuing that at the beginning?
Yeah, of course. Insecurity, right?
Oh,
Also
I
this
get
is,
it.
yeah, but this is an industry also that's competitive. So not just insecurity, but I also had to honestly evaluate and be like, am I willing to put the amount of time that it's going to take in to become as good as I want to be? Right.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it as well. And that was at first probably what held me back. Like I said, like, can I do this? Can I not do this? I don't know. But when I took the dive, I think that's with a lot of people. You're never really going to know. You have to just dive in. And if it doesn't work out, you flop and you get out of the pool. But like that's about it. I mean, if it's not like a life changing risk, it's just I just had to put it out there, and the marketplace was like, oh, I fuck with
It's all good.
The marketplace,
if it flows, it flows.
The marketplace was like, I enjoy this, and I got the message and continued to create content as a creator, and that's that.
I totally relate to what you said about like you have to decide at a certain point that you want to put in as much effort as it takes to get to the place where you want to be. I don't think I fully realized the implications of that. And like I make a lot of like videos about like making stuff, right? And I felt, I was like, wow, these videos are taking a long time. Like I don't feel like I'm being like super efficient in my process. And I kind of had a revelation at one point where like, no, it's good that I'm taking a lot of time and effort to put into this because I'm giving this thing I love the effort it deserves. And that is a huge investment. That really is no joke. So yeah, deciding to do that is, I think, a huge step if you want to like put your stuff out there.
In a way, it's the easiest step, but it's the hardest step because all it is saying that I'm going to do it, right? Like it's like all the years of society, like telling you shouldn't do it, you can't do it. At least this is my experience. I can't speak for other people, but my experience is kind of what me saying it's the hardest but the easiest decision. What's hard about it is all your preconceived notions that other people have kind of put inside of you your whole life. Like you can't do it, it's going to be too hard, all that stuff. And it's just like too short to let someone else dictate what you can and can't do life, right? If you think you can do something, as you said, Morley, like, yeah, if you're honestly going to evaluate and say, yeah, you know what, I'm willing to put this time in, I'm willing to do that, then I say you go for it.
Yeah. And one of the amazing things about like the time we live in is that like you as a musician, you don't have to have like, I don't know, if we go like 100 years, you don't need a full like brass backing band and all this infrastructure behind you. Like, yeah, you need collaborators, you need studio time, producers, whatever else. But the barrier to entry is a lot lower. And it's like with me, like I just need like a camera, tools, materials. And if you really have the drive and you want to do it, it's there for the taking. And that kind of brings me to like something I really wanted to talk about is your experience in this like 2020 landscape of like independent self put out music. Like I'm just curious what that's like. I mean, you're putting your stuff out on Spotify,
Yeah.
doing quite well with it, and I'm really curious to know like what that experience has been for you.
I can always be doing better, you know. So I'm always. I never feel like, oh, I never feel good about my results. It's a nightmare of an industry sometimes. You know, you're working with a
Hmm.
lot of people who I actually personally think that I'm level headed as an artist to a degree. I mean, I have my problems. Every artist, I'm sure, every person does. But it's just like what dealing with a lot of other people is probably the biggest obstacle. What it's like in 2020 is other people's egos is what I'm. You know, when you want to work with people, it's like I have to be an adult and like I have to delegate stuff with other adults. And you know,
Hmm.
obviously, this sounds obvious, but it's now navigating things with adults who are not easy to work with, which is why they chose art. You know what I'm
Those
saying?
being
To a
like
Mhm.
degree,
producers and engineers and things like
producers
that.
and engineers, yeah, mostly. And it's tough to be a producer and engineer because your name's not on it, and you make a big impact. So I understand why it's not an easy thing, but I always try to give as much credit to who I'm working with as possible, and that's how I try to navigate it. But sometimes it's kind of lose lose because a lot of people aren't mentally stable in this industry. Just my opinion,
Hmm.
and I'm not even saying it. I'm really not trying to say it in a bad way at all. Like I might not always be fully, you know, mentally clear, but it's just tough sometimes. That's really what I'd say for 2020 is all the artists who um, I don't know, don't have self awareness. Maybe I think there's a lot of lack of awareness.
Hmm.
And I know that's kind of not really answering your question. It's a weird spinoff of what your question was, but I, I just have to stick to and do my own thing as an independent artist because I'm not going to rely on other people because these people, you never know where someone is mentally. And so as long as I'm just making music, writing lyrics, keeping to my own pace, staying confident, and just being ready to record whenever I have that opportunity, and also ready financially to make life changing opportunities when they appear. That's really what I'm worried about in 2020.
Interesting. You touched on a really fascinating idea in that terms of collaboration. Because as a filmmaker, I've experienced those challenges as well, especially when I first was starting learning, doing student films at university.
Yep.
Like, like it wasn't like what I initially imagined. Like there was a lot more conflict than I anticipated there would be. A lot of, like you mentioned, kind of like egos. Everyone's trying to put their own imprint on it. So
Mm, mm.
it's interesting hearing that from the music perspective, because I always thought music was so much more collaborative than what the filmmaking space was. So that's interesting hearing it from that perspective. Maybe it's because it's opened up so much that literally anybody can be in this space, but at the same time not everyone's willing to be as collaborative as they think it would be. Like I work on my stuff, yeah, I help you with your stuff, that sort of idea. Like there isn't that much of that equal trade-off as much.
Yeah, creative conflict is how I see it. Because everybody's coming into the project with their own ideas and notions and all that. So it's just navigating those when collaborating with other people. But it's the same thing, I think, in any field. Like if I were to go work in a job, like just a normal 9 to 5 job, we're gonna have those spats, like whether it's like group projects or whatever it is. Everyone wants their imprint on things. At least this is my take of it in any area of life, my opinion.
Hmm.
Hmm. It's interesting. And also, like, just to go back to this idea of navigating the independent musical landscape,
Yep.
like, now there's so many platforms because I'm a media nerd. That's why I did my studies in. So,
Love it.
there's SoundCloud, there is Spotify, there is Apple Music, and there's all different types of other independent platforms that we may not even know about. What are some of the challenges in navigating that space and being able, as especially for an artist that's emerging, how do you find the best platform for your music and being able to find your audience in that way?
I wish I knew. Um, I put out music and it just sticks. Fortunately, it's funny. I have a lot of music friends and they're like, "Yo, how does this happen? How does that happen?" I wish that I knew. I really just try to focus on my art and it's in the marketplace. And if it does well, it does well. I don't have a deeper answer than that.
Do you think like perhaps the quality of the music is what matters above all, not so much the distribution platform?
Yeah, I do. I mean, distribution platform is important because it's going to give you some advantages. However, for example, my first song, "Smoking Problems," or my first song on Spotify was called "Smoking Problems Away," and I went to I went through a distributor in England, and they're not big at all. They gave me absolutely no advantages, but that's just the first. Like, I didn't even know that it was possible until it happened that I could put my music on Spotify and Apple Music and make money from it. And so when I did, it was just through this distributor, and I was like, oh, cool. But now I'm going through a different distributor, and they give me a lot more advantages. For example, whether it be communicating with Spotify about my releases, right? The other company didn't have, the first company I was with, the first distributor didn't have that infrastructure to communicate with a company as big as Spotify. Things like that, like just about my releases, getting my releases in on time, having it so I'm able to submit to Spotify's editors. So Spotify has like playlist editors who curate their playlists. So things like that, like I wouldn't get those advantages from the first distributor. So yeah, if there are any artists listening, DistroKid, DistroKid.com is what I go through. I enjoy their services. So yeah, definitely that's probably the advantage they give me as a distributor, at least right now. But I haven't been to all of them. I haven't used every distributor, so I don't know. I can't speak on behalf of all of them.
For sure. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you find so in putting your music out on these platforms, you largely put out singles, right? Like one song at a time?
Yes, although I love albums, it's just because they perform better in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So do you have like plans to produce or aspirations to do full length albums, or do you find the singles work? Okay.
Well, the singles still may work better, but right now I'm focused on singles and just developing that. I don't want to release an album to, not that it's nobody. I'm fortunate to have the audience I have, but I think that I'll be able to grow my audience substantially faster with singles at the moment than I would with an album, because I think, for whatever reason, today it's hard to get people, especially if they don't know you, to listen to a full-length project.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I know I'll listen to an album, and a lot of the albums I listen to the first time through, I'm like not in love with it. It'll take a few listens to really get fully on board. And if you don't care about the artist, then you're much less likely to do that.
100%. And I still have to realize, or I have to figure out that infrastructure. To me, it feels like homework right now, so it's hard for me to do it. But with creating a return path outside of just like my Spotify, but a return path on my Instagram, on my Facebook, and keeping up with my socials. So it'll just inevitably lead to the people who follow me seeing my name more times a day and listening to my music more. It's also going to be about releasing more content, like more stuff on Spotify. And that's going to help me grow. But those will all be singles. And I don't anticipate releasing an album for a long time.
Gotcha.
And unless something changes completely like that. But, for right now, it's just the plan is singles.
That's weird that singles or that albums aren't as, like you mentioned, won't help grow an audience as much. It's really weird. Because I don't know, it's strange to see that.
I think albums will help. They can help solidify an audience, and they will when you get to a certain point. And like, I just don't think I'm at that point yet where releasing an album would create like a ripple effect in the industry. Like, I want to get to that point before I put my time into an album and then it not do as well as I'd want it to. That's just me. It's not that I don't love a good album, and it's just. I think also with an album is people kind of, when I release a single, if they want to listen to the new song, they kind of just have to listen to that one, and it makes it do better. It does. That's just what it is right now, at least. And Spotify has kind of made it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think with the playlists and how they would promote stuff on playlists.
Yep, and they had to. It was evolution because people were illegally downloading albums, right? So they had to do this. And it's a good model. I don't mind it. But if I were getting paid and people were buying my stuff, yeah, I'd make an album for sure. But that's not how it's working for me right now, at least.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. That's also not quite what I would expect.
Yeah, it's crazy how these platforms have just upended everything so much in the last few years. It really is, especially because like Apple Music is so much oriented towards the artists and albums, where Spotify is so much more about playlists and this amalgamation of playlists of different artists. It's really interesting trying to navigate that new space. I can imagine for people starting out, it can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, that's why I just try to focus on the music, really, and that's probably a bad piece of advice because a lot of people are focused on marketing.
No, I don't think it is. I think that I'm a huge proponent of just like focus on making great stuff and the cream will rise to the top, because there's so much outside of your control that like, yeah, you can try to game the system as much as you want and try to be in the best place, the right place at the right time. And I think some people are bigger proponents of that approach and it works for them. But I think it matters about your personality. Like, I think you're kind of like me, Chris, where you just want to like spend your time like creating and not have to worry a ton about playing the game, you know?
For sure, because playing the game is at other people's expense, or it's like on their time frame, and it's just like we're just trying to create good stuff, man, and live a life that's stress free. At least that's me.
I feel that.
Yeah, but you always feel more creatively fulfilled when you make stuff that feels personal and fulfilling to you. It's all you can do, really.
100%.
I just wanted to ask, like, this may be a long ways off, but once you make that first album, what would you imagine it would be about thematically? What would be the main, what would be some of the core ideas or messages you would have in it?
I wouldn't want to switch too much from what's been successful for me. I'm always open to trying new things, but I think on like an initial album, just about life, and trying to. Yeah, I've never been a huge. I just make a collection of songs. I'm not with the album. It's not really like, for me at least, I'm not doing it around a theme because, in my opinion, that's going to limit my creativity. Because if I go in with this idea of, oh, I'm going to go in and each song is going to correlate back to this theme, it's kind of like you're putting yourself in a box. At least for me, in the way I create, I sometimes feel that way. So I would probably just try to focus on song to song when I were making an album, and then just figure out which is the best order.
So when you make a song, is it always about like where you are in the moment, what the things that you're feeling, the ideas that you have?
Yeah, it is ideas I have. It depends. I could go through a few lyrics. Like at one point, I have a song called 1313, and that's I literally had $1,313 in my wallet. That was it. I have a song called Throw My Phone, and I just felt like throwing my phone. And I was like, I need to write this down. Yeah, but that's true. And then Smoking Problems Away, I was just smoking. And I'm like, I was listening to a beat. I'm like, yo. But then there are others where maybe they're a little more forced. You know, they're not always like as organic as all of those were. So like my most recent song, Can't Think Straight, it was more of like I had thought of it at some point and I had just written it down, but it wasn't based on it. It was more of like, just, I knew that was like a relatable concept that I think a lot of people could latch onto, not thinking straight. Whereas that wasn't the case with Throw My Phone, Smoking Problems Away, 1313.
Do you feel like a bigger attachment to those songs that feel more in the moment and inspired?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, because it's like nostalgic too, just thinking back to it, because, I knew how the emotions were so powerful, and I'm lucky to have an outlet like music where I can go and write that stuff down, right? Because a lot of people would just be going through that stuff and just like sit on it, and I think sometimes not know how to process it. I still might not know how to process it, but at least I'm lucky to be able to just write it down and then share it with people. And because it was such an honest and raw moment, a lot of people are like, wow, I feel the same way about it. Thank you. And that's the best feeling as an artist that you can get, is when someone says that, because I didn't make it for someone to say thank you, but just the fact that, like I said, an idea in my head is now affecting someone else's life to a degree is just empowering. It just makes me feel like nothing I've ever felt before.
Yeah. Like we've talked about it on this podcast before, like the benefits of authenticity are unlimited. Like you may not know at the time if you're touching someone or that it'll affect someone in some way. But if you create something that's really authentic, people feel it and they are affected by it. in ways that you may not expect. You might think like, oh, this is just me. This is just what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there's a strange irony, but pleasant in the sense that like this more personal a work, the more accessible and personal it will be to others.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent point, Ryan. I agree with that. It's not. Yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting talking about this stuff because it's never how I think about it in music. The music just happens. But we're now just kind of talking.
You're kind of thinking about it like retrospectively now.
Yeah, and I don't always know what I guess the answer is because it's just art, and it's like I'm painting. I feel like it's just brush strokes. Like, are you asking the paint? This is going to sound kind of like, I'm trying not to use that word again, but pretentious. Let's say. I feel like a painter, and it's like, would you ask a painter like, oh, why did you make that stroke? Like, why there? It's like, yeah, it's not really about that for me. I understand why people ask the question for sure, but
exactly,
just kind of just flowing. I try to get to a flow state.
Love that. I love the flow states. As someone who's listening to this podcast is gonna love that I just said that. No, it's funny. It's funny, like you saying like, oh, this is gonna sound pretentious or whatever, because I feel like, not to get meta again, but we are always like touching on things in these conversations where like, oh, not to sound like a platitude, not to sound pretentious, but like it is hard to talk about this stuff and not sound pretentious. Exactly. Cause it's like, it's very retrospective, as you said. Trying to get into the details after the fact is very difficult when you are so in the moment as you're creating it. But sometimes that's the only way to talk about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's cool. I'm not complaining about it, just saying that it's just interesting that, because I don't usually think about it. It's usually just on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. And that's good for me, creation wise, I'd say. But it's cool to go back and maybe I'll figure some stuff out just from thinking about stuff retrospectively. Just like about my art, I appreciate the questions. It's always good to talk to people about art because a lot of my biggest breakthroughs were from talking to other creators just about, and I say breakthroughs, like not like I'm freaking figuring out like anything that's groundbreaking, but just in my own personal journey. Talking to other creators always makes me feel good. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Oh, thank you. I'm learning so much from music and more of like the modern musical landscape just from talking to you right now.
Let's get it. Love it. Exchanging information. The internet.
Exactly. And like just in regards to like how we talk about creative process, I don't think it's pretentious to like just be having a good conversation about, because just the creative process, especially each of our creative processes, are just so abstract and different from each other. The way Morley creates and the way Chris creates and the way I create is all very different, and trying to put that into words is so, it's not always easy.
I don't think it is pretentious by any stretch of the imagination. I just think when you try to put into words, you can get some like, you're like, ooh, this sounds like, I feel like I'm talking out of my ass here.
No, I understand. I feel that a lot. I get it. Just to go back to the writing process, Chris, because that's something I'm really interested, because I find that like hip hop and rap and R&B have such a unique structure to the way the songs are written. So what's that writing process like for you?
It used to be structured. It's funny. It used to be in that hip hop, like, I don't know if it's hip hop specifically, but like it would just be in that structure. But again, since I've done that, I think I've evolved as an artist because I kind of got rid of that structure, and I'm able to just go in whatever direction I want. The structure when I'm making the songs different each time, but it's usually an observation that I, or not an observation. It could be an observation, but also just a feeling that I had, an observation about my feelings, let's say. And then I write it down. And then from there, it's about finding the right beat, right? A beat is obviously half the song. So usually it depends, but usually I get the theme first, not necessarily the theme, but what I kind of want it to be centered around the song, and then go from there with a beat. But recently I'll say it's different because recently I've been working with tons of different producers, and we're like making stuff from scratch, which I've never done before. The instruments out of scratch. And now I'm saying, oh wow, like I can tailor these beats specifically for what I think would be cool. And that's a whole, like, I'm just starting that journey. That's another thing I think is going to make my music a lot better, is that I'm now choosing the sounds I want to go with. So it's always an evolving process, the writing process. It's not the same each and every time. I wish I had a better, like more insightful answer that might help you. I don't know exactly what the right answer is, but it's there's not one, right? It's just different every time, and that's that.
Does it start kind of like with like notes or like an idea or like an image, and then it kind of snowballs from there?
No, man, I'm a stoner, okay, and so I don't know if, but I'm just flowing. I'm not the note type taker. I just, like I said, go with the flow. I'll write down a good idea, but I'm not like oh, I want this to be like that and this that. It's just not how I go about it. But there are some people who do it like that. It's just not my creative process.
And what's it like starting from writing and like you just mentioned before, starting with the music, with the beats? What are some of like the key differences that you notice from that?
From having, like you're saying now, creating beats, what's the difference?
Yeah, like you sometimes you start with like writing like the lyrics first, or then like you just mentioned, like starting with like the musical beats where like you're working with producers and then tailoring lyrics to those beats.
Yeah, I think it was more tailoring beats or sounds that will sound good with my voice. Is I guess more
Okay.
what I meant.
Okay.
So there are certain, and I don't know anything about music notes, nothing. I just sing, honestly. So, but I still am able. I think I have a decent. I can tell what it's going to sound good and not good together, even though I don't know the notes of the sounds that are playing and all that. But it's more just like, oh, is that guitar going to overpower my voice, or is it going to sound good with it? Is that piano going to add something? That type of thing. Like, is it going to add some texture to the song? And so now I would always go with beats that were pre-made before maybe as of a month ago. I would just go with stuff that was pre-made, and then I might have lyrics, and I would then listen to beats and find where they fit, or I would write after I heard the pre-made beat. But it's not the same each time, as I said. But what's tough about those pre-made beats is they're not exclusive for the most part, unless you buy them exclusively, and that's, you're paying like an arm and a leg at that point. It's not really worth it, especially because, again, you didn't create it for yourself. So it's like, do I want to buy the exclusive that, I mean, it's good and it's cool that it's mine, but
it's not perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So what's nice is
I struggle with finding songs for my videos that I'm not adding anything musically to. So I can't even imagine how frustrating it must be to try to like slog through. I would imagine like the thousands of stuff you can find on the internet.
When you're working with good people, it makes it so much easier. I just have to say, because there's this guy Decap from Nashua who I'm starting to work with, and Decap is one of the biggest sound creators in the world, and he's from our hometown, Morley, of Nashua, New Hampshire.
Oh yeah, for the listeners, I don't think we were recording when he said this, but Chris and I are from the same town.
Okay, there you go. All right, yeah, so Nashua, New Hampshire, and this guy Decap is now in San Francisco, and he specializes, not like producers do different things, which is really cool when you go into stuff. Like this guy Decap solely focuses on sound creation and creating sounds that other producers are going to use in their songs because they're just awesome. So like he's made drums in Nashua in his parents' basement that are on platinum records, and he he just focuses on the sound creation. Like that's it. I mean, that's not just it. He does a lot more than that, but at least when he first started, he locked in on being awesome at that, right? Creating these sounds. That's what makes him different in the marketplace. Then I go to another producer who mixes my vocals, which is a whole different art form, right? Than creating the sounds that are going to go in the beat, to someone who's mixing the vocals into the beat, right? It's completely different, and it's just really cool to see, but also interesting to that. When I first started, I just thought all producers they're like one and the same, right? Like I would just think, oh yeah, I'm just going to a producer, they're a producer. But it's so cool to see that they specialize in other stuff. And what's going to be really cool is when we can get all these people to work together. That's what I'm really excited for, is when I can get someone who specializes in creating the beat and is literally known as one of the best in the world. Decap from Nashua is considered one of the best in the world. He's sold the most sounds ever on Splice. Splice is Are you familiar with Splice? It's basically just for producers to download sounds. So he's like sold over like 5 million sounds. And again, all these records, that's Decap. And then this other guy, Knox Beats. Sorry if I'm rambling here, boys.
No, it's all good.
Has produced for Joyner Lucas. And when I say produced, mixed vocals. So he'll just make the vocals sound good and fit really well into the beat. And so he's done that for Joyner Lucas, Token, Chris Webby, many others. Yeah. I feel like I forgot the question. I've kind of just been going on a tangent.
No, that's super interesting.
That's been amazing. I never knew you could have drums with like platinum records. That's
yeah.
Right.
I didn't know it either. And then I'm also working right now with a guitar player named Charlie Chronopoulos, and he played instruments on Broadway, like during Broadway shows. And what's cool about all these connections, so that's different, right? He's not specializing in drums. He's not specializing in sound creation. He like specializes in notes and playing instruments on a level that's so high that Broadway was like, yo, we're going to have you play during our live shows. And what's cool also is all these people are like in their 30s, and we're just like, they're vets to a degree, even though they're only 30, obviously, but they know what they're doing. And when I can get all of these people together and specialize what they're doing specifically all on one song, I think we're going to make a huge record. When I can get these guys, Decap, who's from Nashua, Knox Beats, who mixes my vocals, and then this guy Charlie, who just plays who's on Broadway, who plays some of the just most beautiful guitar I've ever heard.
I'm just curious, the guitar player's name is Charlie?
Charlie, yeah, very good.
Has he been on any of your recent songs?
Yeah, so he actually did No One Is Reliable.
Oh, okay, yeah, that had guitar in it, yeah.
And so what's cool about that song is I had just gotten a guitar online from a different song, and it had been like a rap record for like 2 years. I had this like as this rap record that was just in the vault. I loved the lyrics, but I was like, it just sounded funky. Like it didn't sound as good as it could. And then at one day I was like slowing, like there's some internet software where you can slow audio down. And I just slowed it down, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot better if I would just sing it, because these lyrics are really raw. And so anyway, I had the loop, and then we ended up going to the studio, and my producer Knox is like, yeah, we should get some live guitar on this instead. And so Charlie played the live guitar on No One Is Reliable. Because at first it was just like some really, really low quality loop that I got off the internet. And now it's like a record that is industry standard. And I'm very lucky to have worked with those two people, Knox Beats and Charlie, so cool, on that record.
That's awesome I've had a similar experience where like you're working on something and it doesn't feel right. I've gotten better, I think, as I've refined like my video editing process. Okay. If I'm like really just like zeroing on a clip and I just keep going back and forth and I'm getting really antsy, I'm like, oh, this just really isn't jiving. I know to stop working on that thing and just try to like switch it up altogether. Like it's just at a certain point you're banging your head into the wall, and that's so cool that you were able to take that and actually find something that worked with it.
It wouldn't have happened if I was just farting around, honestly, on my computer, and I was like slowing stuff down, and I was like, I wonder what that would sound like. And that was that. And that's what's cool about the creation process, is you never know. And that's why it's always good to get your ideas down, right? Because if I hadn't gotten that idea down, it wouldn't have been there for me to slow it down that day. Exactly. So I'm fortunate. It was fortunate that it came to be the way it did.
I love it when we're just like experimenting, and like some of the best work or some like these breakthroughs just happen through accidents, just because we decided to experiment with it.
All the time. Even in the studio when I recorded that record, like the end of the song is just completely improvised. And so
no way.
Yeah, and so it's just cool, and how not the whole song was improvised, but just the end of the song, how I wrapped it up. And it was because my producer Knox, he's the one who mixes my vocals. He was just like, yeah, you need to, and this is why collaboration is so cool and helpful. He's like, you need to wrap the record up. He's like, we need to finish it strong. It's something I'll always say to artists, and it's really important, is to try and start and finish records strong, because you don't want to lose them. You also want to, it's like even like an essay, right? Like anything you're writing, you want to start, finish strong. And so my producer fortunately was there that day to be like, nah, like let's push what you can do. Let's get it just a little bit, just get it better. Just keep getting better, and improving it. And he gave me that piece of advice that really improved it by finishing up the song and improvising at the end.
I think it's funny. I think I came into this conversation like before we started expecting that like because I like from an outsider perspective, like not knowing anything about your process, I was kind of expecting that like you're putting your own stuff on Spotify, everything's being done remotely. It's all very um, not to like put down like any preconceived notions, but like the level of collaboration and artistry working together is definitely something I didn't expect with what you're doing. That's really amazing.
I think everyone, you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm in a like in making YouTube videos. It's a space where people are doing it by themselves a lot more.
I guess people can do it by themselves. I don't mean to say, I know for me,
it's a lot better with other people. I definitely, you're able to do things that you wouldn't be able to do on your own, ideas that you wouldn't have got on your own.
Exactly.
No, there's always something nice from working together. That's why I wish more filmmakers would do that more, especially at the local level, because I know how to do all the things like the filming, the audio recording, the editing, the directing, but I can't physically do there. I physically can't do all of that at once. So, but that creative process is so important. Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, I didn't. I get it. Is all I was saying. I get what you're going through, and it's cool that despite being in different fields, we can still relate on that working with other people. And I'm doing it. I'm trying at least. But I'm also, like I said, I also deal with obstacles going through it because I've gotten in a lot of fights because of it. You burn through some relationships. Like there are some relationships that haven't worked out, and it's not because it was anything personal. It was because some people have a hard time getting over themselves. And sometimes in some situations that might have been me. I don't know. But I think if I want to be as big as I want to be, I have to swallow my pride and just realize that I have my blind spots. And that's why when you have people you trust and a good team around you, and I'd say it probably is going to be the same thing for you in the film industry. When you realize and you have those parts around you and they're steady, they're reliable, you can trust them. It makes it a lot easier to collaborate. But when those things aren't all in place, it's actually really stressful to collaborate and can be really hard.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of maturity to be able to separate your ego and be aware of those blind spots, your own personal blind spots. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I'm also immature as really. So thank you. I'm a nuanced person. I'm also like a 5-year-old. No, for real though.
Everyone in this conversation is a 20-something figuring out their life. We're all there.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the understanding.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But that creative process, especially in music, where you have all these people of different types of backgrounds, it's amazing what you can do once you put them together. They work together. What has that personally been like for you working with different types of musicians, producers, DJs? Because you work with someone I see called Knox Beats on a lot of your songs.
Yep, that's my vocal engineer.
Your vocal engineer. So just what are some the best moments of creating with people like this?
The best moments are when, when he pushed me to finish No One Is Reliable. That record wouldn't have been what it was without him.
That's my favorite one.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's one of my favorites too, for sure. I appreciate it. Yeah. And so, I don't know if I have much more to add on that front. Like I've said, it's just when you can't trust the people and their egos are really bad, it's tough. Knox is a complex individual too. My vocal engineer, he is one of the dopest guys, really, really nice guy. But, the industry jades a lot of people, it makes a lot of people cynical. Working with a lot of artists is, again, I feel like I'm even keeled as an artist. Most people are not, I have to say. I'm even keeled, at least when it comes to the business side of art, I'll say. But, a lot of people are not. A lot of people will screw you over big time. Like you'll have done a record for them and they can just take it maybe. And then, it's really you have some legal, you have some course of action legally, but it's going to cost a lot of money, so it's right. Is it even worth it? So there's just a lot. So the collaboration process, sometimes it's tough because even Knox, even though we're boys, it's also everyone's always coming at stuff from dealing with different things that happen to them. So there are just some more barriers of entry. Like you really, at least for Knox and myself, I really had to basically like, I don't know, just show that I was a trustworthy person for him to even like think that it was worth his time type of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Just because he also is someone, as you should be, who values their time and wants to make sure they're using it wisely.
For sure.
And not going to work with someone who's going to screw them over is all I mean, if I didn't clarify that.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's similar in any creative industry, like Ryan was talking about with film, where the project is a team sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has inputs that if it's not down on paper is hard to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have different expectations about what everyone is worth, or there's an imbalance of information, it sounds like that's where the really terrible situations arise.
Certainly. I would, tend to agree. Don't know why it is that people are like that, but it's just things that happen to them in their life, I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, I know some people have some very strong opinions on that. Kanye West has been very vocal about it for years.
That guy, man. That guy. That's a whole different thing that we shouldn't even get into.
That's a whole rabbit hole.
It's all good. It's all good. He's a tremendous creator for sure.
Who are some of your biggest inspirations or biggest influences of your music?
Probably just like, I don't know. I try not to fanboy anybody. But
no, not fanboy, but just like, who are people that you just admire? You think like, oh, I like the work that they do.
Yeah. I'll probably say I grew up like just stuff that I grew up listening to for a lot of the time. Like I grew up in California for a while, and so there were like there's just a few local like bands that are popular, but I'd listen to like Counting Crows, if you've heard them, or Train. They're both Bay Area bands. And what's also funny is like I would listen to that, and then my pops would play like Eminem when I was like 3 or 4 years old, which is just very funny because I had that from a young age, those contrasting influences of not just like that folk type of music I was talking about, or indie rock, but like also that hip hop influence. So there's some of both there. Right now, people who I respect in the industry are probably just people who are doing it and just putting their heads down and not talking too much about it.
The opposite of what we're doing at this moment.
No, not like talking, but like talking about it, like people who are like hyping themselves up, and,
right?
And like they need to do that to kind of like, certainly not those people. They're not necessarily, but some of those people still can make good music. I mean, look at Kanye West. So I don't know. These things are nuanced. I don't really have specific artists. I guess if you know who Vic Mensa is, I like Vic Mensa a lot as an artist, but I also heard some sketchy stuff about these people. That's another thing why I'm always tentative. Like, just because you make good art doesn't always mean you're a good person. So some artists I look up to, Kanye is one of them. This guy named Vic Mensa I like a lot. And it depends on a lot of stuff of what I'm listening to, but no like huge like number one inspiration that I'd say is like why I do what I do.
Yeah, we're all a product of the millions of little things that inspire us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I agree. I'd be reticent in saying like any one maker is the person I look up to the most. Like it's a melange of like tens of them. And even trying to make that list, you're like, oh, I put that person first. What does that mean? What are people going to take from that?
I don't think you can rank them.
No. I guess. So we've talked a lot about your current, what you're currently working on and in the past, but just before we wrap it up, maybe this is a very difficult question, but what do you see the next few years is happening? What is it? Do you have a vision for the future or none at all? You just taking the best opportunities that come up?
I definitely have a vision for what I want. Really just a place where I can make music stress-free. I try not to get too far ahead of myself in terms of like, because anything could happen. I'm going to take things as they come for sure, and just evolve as an artist and make as many relationships as I possibly can, right? There's not much more, I think, to it for me. because I don't want. That's not why I got into art. That's not why I want to do art. Is to like worry and. I mean, it's a good question, and don't get me wrong. I don't mean to like shoot your question down. It is a good question. I can't think that far ahead. It's really I'm always just thinking about the art and the art. And as you said, Morley, you're a believer of it. I'm a firm believer that the art is gonna. If I focus on that and get as good as I possibly can at that it's gonna take me where I want to go, and I just trust that.
Love it.
Yeah, it's great. I also wanted to mention that I love how each of your songs have such a distinct feel and musical beat to them. Even though like the singing's excellent and consistent across it all, I love how each song has its own identity. Because so many musicians, like like Nickelback, for example, like they'll have the kind of problem where they all kind of sound the same. So I love how your music's so diverse across the board like that.
I appreciate that. It's definitely a concerted effort to not get stagnant, right? And I feel like I still am going to get very stagnant at times, even though I'm going to really try. I try to be cognizant of that because I don't want to just be like a one song that people listen to and then like, oh, that's all you can do. That's definitely not what I want to be known for. So I appreciate you noticing that and saying that, Ryan. It means a lot.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, for sure, man. Just wanted to let you know that because is that something you kind of think of like, how can I bring something new to this song that I'm making?
Yes, 100%. Always. And it's almost like, how am I going to evolve? I do try to evolve. I don't try to force lyrics, but I do try to evolve my sound, whether it be listening to new things or trying just new styles out. I may never use them in a song, or you may never hear them in a song, but I might like tweak a few lines. Like it's very subtle stuff, but yeah, always trying to figure out how I can, as I said, not be stagnant with my sound.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, I do think exactly as you said. I think that is going to continue you on an awesome trajectory, and I'm super excited to see what's coming out next.
Well, I appreciate it, man, and I appreciate you guys having me. Really, it's always good to just talk about art. As I said, a lot of good things have come for me on my personal journey just when talking about art to other artists.
Definitely, and that's one of the things I'm missing with COVID is being able to do that in person. But it's nice that we can still do it remotely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, why don't we transition to a little bow on top of the episode, which is what we're putting in the spotlight this week.
Yep.
So, Ryan, do you want to start that off?
Yes, I can. So for my Into the Spotlight this week, I chose the Eminem album Recovery, which I guess you guys must know about. It came out 10 years ago, which is ironic. So I just wanted to celebrate its 10-year anniversary. But I really love this album because it's perhaps the most personal album from Eminem. Like it's the least Slim Shady and the most Marshall Mathers, since it deals with a lot of themes of like him overcoming depression, addiction, and it's just an album about getting back up on your feet and just going for it. This is the album that introduced me to hip hop and to rap and to R&B and everything else. So this is the first album I think I ever listened all the way through completely. This is like one of my biggest like musical influences, exploring that world. So I love the album. I love how he collaborates with all different types of artists, from Lil Wayne to Rihanna to Pink, going to like rap rock and doing all different types of like cross musical genres that way. So I love the album. Check it out just to celebrate its 10-year anniversary. And yeah, it's great.
Made a lot of money, that album.
Yes,
a lot of money.
All right.
I'll go
for
and
it,
then I'm
Chris.
going to have Morley finish off because I think Morley will do a great job of wrapping it up. I'll say for me, it's just everybody who's doing it and not getting recognized right now. I don't have someone specifically, but just imagine how the fortitude mentally that it takes to keep going with something that people probably don't, they don't look up to it until you start having success a lot of the time, right? So people are just going through it because they love it, and that is why I do it, and those are the people I'm putting into the spotlight on this episode. Let's get it.
I love it.
All right. For me, again, as usual, nothing to do with anything, but it's a show that I really enjoyed recently. Actually, it has a bit to do with what we've been talking about because it has to do with music, and that is the show Unorthodox on Netflix. So it's just a 4-episode miniseries. It's It's actually based on a true story about a young girl in the Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, who kind of flees the community and runs away to Berlin. So the Hasidic Jewish community is a very like conservative religious community, and she leaves a marriage that she's in, and you find out pretty early on that she's pregnant. Again, based on a true story, and kind of discovers this music school in Berlin and rediscovers modern life.
I'm sold. I'm watching it.
It's really, really good. It's incredibly well researched. So there's actually like a 30-minute documentary as well on Netflix about how it was made and all the research that went into it. And the first 2 episodes, like it was really interesting. And like, I kept seeing aspects of Hasidic life that like, I mean, I'm Jewish, so I know some of them, but it's a very specific kind of closed off Orthodox conservative community. So, and I never spent time in a Hasidic household. So I find myself just being like, oh wow, that's like so interesting how they're depicting that. But the last 2 episodes are like so emotional. Like I was crying at the end of the last episode.
Well then it's an emotional journey is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Well then I'm going to tune in.
Yeah.
I remember
really cool.
I remember seeing the trailer. I had no idea it was based on a true story though.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
That's wild.
It's by a book. It's based on a book by Deborah Feldman, who had the same experience. So everything in Williamsburg is based on the story, and then they kind of invented a new story for when she was in Berlin to protect the original author because she's a public figure.
Right.
It's also almost entirely in Yiddish, which is kind of this language that is a mixture of Hebrew and some Eastern European languages and English that's spoken in a lot of Jewish communities. But that doesn't like detract from the watchability at all. It actually makes it even more interesting because Yiddish is a very, very interesting language that has a lot of people use Yiddish words all the time, like chutzpah and mashigana, and it was really cool. It actually worked very, very well. I'm not a huge fan of watching shows with subtitles, but would definitely recommend Unorthodox on Netflix. It's a quick watch, like 4 1-hour episodes. Very well done.
Love it. All
right, Chris, thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, gentlemen. Really been a fun time.
Yeah, it was great. It's a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to your next stuff. I'm going to be hyping you up to all my friends.
My man, Ryan. I appreciate it, man. And Morley, I appreciate you as well. Please, guys, keep going with this because it's cool. It's cool to talk to creators. I'm sure you guys will find, like I said, I find breakthroughs when I talk to other creators. I'm sure you guys find the same or will find the same as you continue to do it. So I'm inspired by you guys doing this, honestly.
Really?
Thank you.
100%, Ryan. Yes.
Wow. Well, thank you. That's amazing. Thank you.
Please.
Ditto. Real quick, I know we touched on it, but Chris, if the people want to listen to their music, where can they do that? And what should they search?
Yeah, they can go on Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, YouTube, and what you will search is ChrispyD, no spaces, and that's ChrispyD, and you will enjoy the music. I feel that way, and if you don't, DM me, let me know, and we'll hash it out. All right.
Sounds good.
Appreciate you, boys.
The gauntlet has been thrown.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, have a great day.
Have a great night.
And now, to send off this great episode, here's the song Exile by ChrispyD.
It's okay if you hate it. I don't understand. Try to let it go, but you shouldn't. Leave me alone in exile, I'll be over here at least. Meanwhile, everything that I do seems futile, envious whenever I see you smile. Hard to be happy when others succeed. Narcissistic, what it means to be me. It is what it is, so I say c'est la vie. But I don't forget if we ever had beef. I cannot control the way that I am. I'm a sore loser of sorts, I get competitive, and it's okay if you hate it. I don't understand. Try to let it go, but you should know that I can't. Instead of getting bitter, I should go and get famous. All the time I waste on an everyday basis. Got the type of talent that could take a kid places, but I am yet to harness it. While others start to make it, I get jealous. I'm jealous, what else can I say? I want it all and I want it today. I get distracted when others get made. I can't help myself out, you should stay far away. Please leave me alone in exile. I'll be over here, release me while everything that I do seems futile. Envious whenever I see you smile. Hard to be happy when others succeed. Narcissistic, what it means to be me. It is what it is, so I say c'est la vie. But I don't forget if we ever have beef. I cannot control the way that I am. I'm a sore loser of sorts. I get competitive and it's okay if you hate it. I'd understand. Try to let it go, but you should know that I can't. Passive aggressive, a little obsessive. Ask why is it you that the game has accepted? Don't get it, I sweat it, I've been losing sleep. Tossing and turning the past couple weeks. It's dreadful, so dreadful, what else can I do? Complain on the track when I step in the booth. It's one of those days when I can't hear the truth. I guess jealousy stems from wanting to be you. Please leave me alone in exile. I'll be over here, release me while everything that I do seems futile. Envious whenever I see you smile. Hard to be happy when others succeed. Narcissistic, what it means to be me. It is what it is, so I say c'est la vie. But I don't forget if we ever have beef. I cannot control the way that I am. I'm a sore loser of sorts. I get competitive and it's okay if you hate it. I'd understand. Try to let it go, but you should know that I can't.